welcome. They think it's all sober. Love from Karl.
Woo!
How
Fresh
are
off the
you?
plane.
Fresh off the plane. I've just got back from Ibiza.
You honestly, like, because we wanted to get you on for ages, and then we had this little slot up here, and I was like, God, do you want to come on? And you were like, yeah, I'd love to. I'm in Ibiza. And then you've changed your flight plans.
I have.
Just to come here.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Mate, when I got the message, I just got up. I looked at my Insta because I don't have my notifications on.
Yeah.
I read it and I was like, they want me to go and they think it's all sober. I followed you guys for ages. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, man. But how's Ibiza?
It was amazing. It was amazing. It's my first time back since I've been sober.
Right.
Nice.
So it was a bit like, okay, I'm very comfortable in my sobriety now. I know I'm never going to drink again. People say that I shouldn't say that, but I know that I'm not.
Yeah.
But I went to chill out and I thought, I used to go to Ibiza and I used to party hard every single year. I've been 15 times and I kind of wanted to do that thing where you reclaim it because it had this attachment that was go to Ibiza, get on the sesh, drink, do drugs. I need to go back and I need to change that narrative. I need to reclaim it a little bit. And I did. I read books and I ate nice food and I went swimming and I went to bed at 9 o'clock.
Yeah,
Honestly,
perfect.
we're such pioneers of like Ibiza is not the place you think it is if you give it a chance.
Yeah,
and you've
yeah.
just got back as well, right? But you had a sort of a juxtaposed experience, didn't you? Because you still had to go and do the clubby bits too.
I had to provide the party. So,
Okay,
you know,
okay.
but it was good. And, you know, it's still my favourite island on the planet.
Yeah.
Sober, more so.
Yeah.
Like, you actually realise how many nice food spots there are, how many nice
Yeah,
like beaches, how much stuff you can actually go and do, the hiking you can go and do there. It's incredible, right?
It's beautiful. And I don't want to sound like a spiritual wanker, but I think it's really magical. Like when I'm there, there's something that it makes me feel calm. Even though I was in the crazy and I used to go party there, I had a great time. I can still go party there, but it's just a nice place to relax.
I agree. And there is something really special about that sunset. Like we were lucky enough to do a boat for your stag, weren't we? We just kind of sat out there on the outside Mambo on a boat just looking at the sun. And there is
so
something,
nice.
I mean, and that boat was chaos, but I still felt calm.
It was a moment of like calmness, like just in this like chaotic tornado of everyone else around us being off their face. But you know,
Story of my sobriety, to be honest.
Yeah, you're still in the eye of the storm, just like watching it all happen. Being
Yeah,
like, I'm still
yeah.
on ground. But no, thank you for coming on. It's
Thank you.
it's great to have you. And well, in true, they think it's all sober fashion. I think just to give our listeners some context, we're going to take you into the time machine. And
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've stepped into my own
I'm
time
ready
machine.
for some
Tom.
time travel.
I don't know if I am.
Just before you throw you in, how long's it been sobriety was now?
3 years, 8 months.
3 years, 8
so
months.
January 2021.
Nice. Okay, amazing. So yeah, just for our listeners' knowledge. Right, to the time machine, Jamie.
Christ,
on.
I've got a little bit of a sore throat post Reading. The time machine needs a bit of extra fuel,
Time machine
bit of
doesn't
extra
blame his
diesel.
tools, my
come
liege.
on, right.
Am I going to look younger when I go back?
Anything could happen. Trust me. I went in there bald once and came out with his hair, so fuck knows what's going on. Right.
It was good.
Yeah, that was nice.
And we're back.
you.
Young Karl.
Carl
Good.
Young, wasn't he a famous
Carl Jung.
psychologist?
Yeah.
He
Yeah,
was a
there you
famous
go.
psychologist.
Young
yeah.
Carl.
philosopher,
That's your
yeah,
rapper
something,
name.
yeah.
You don't want me rapping.
So what were your first memories of alcohol growing up? Were they fairly positive or were you very aware?
Very aware. Yeah, very
Right.
aware. They were really mixed, actually. So mum and dad, completely different. And my parents separated when I was young, when I was about 8.
Right.
So my dad is a football guy, plays football, season ticket holder. He used to train the local football teams, like the junior football teams. Football was his life, as was having a beer, but not in a way that felt unhealthy.
Right.
But I can't remember like seeing my dad without a can of beer in his hand. He's always got cans in the fridge. If you go around the house, it's, oh, do you want a can? Do you want a Foster's? Like, Dad, as an alcoholic, and I do use that language for myself, why would I drink Foster's? It's like, it's 4%. Have you got any Stella? Yeah, so my dad always had a can in his hand, salt of the earth type guy, works in a factory. So with him, positive. But he's, that side of my family are Irish.
Right.
Yeah. And I feel like everyone like says that and does that look when you say that part of the family are Irish, because the cliche, they are big drinkers. And so if I was spending time with my dad, with my aunties, my uncles, there's shitloads of them, it was drinking. But it just felt wholesome, and it felt like a hug, and it felt like nice family time. It was fine to drink in your early teens with that part of the family. It was just kind of what you did. And if anything, it was very normalised and it was encouraged. It's like, oh, it's all right, have a beer, have a can. So it was, to me, I would describe that as fairly normal from my dad's point of view. In terms of my mum, that's where it gets a bit more complex. So my mum and dad separated when I was 8. Our next door neighbour was a heroin addict, and for some reason, when they separated, my mum got together with this heroin addict. She married him. She had a kid with him within 6 months. And it was really interesting because she didn't get into drugs when she was with this guy. He was my stepdad. We had to call him dad. And I think she didn't get into drugs when she was with him because he was violent. So there was quite a lot going on at home. There was a lot of domestic violence. He would, anything that we owned of value, he would sell it to feed his addiction. Or he would go out and he would burgle houses, and he was in and out of prison all the time. And then he'd bring that stuff back to our house. So we'd have the police around all the time, looking around the house for stolen goods, looking around the house for drugs. And it was just really, I'd gone from this environment where my mum and dad were high school sweethearts. They got married when they were 16. My mum had me when she was 17. They'd been very well behaved. My mum didn't really drink. Suddenly I'd gone from that, they'd separated. So my mum's with this heroin addict, and there's all of this drama going on. The police knocked down our door on multiple occasions because they needed to get into the house to arrest him. And then as time went on, he became more physically violent, and that was towards my mum and towards me and my sisters. And so we had to have like a panic button installed in the house, and if something was happening, we could press the button and the police would come to the house really quickly instead of calling 999. And then it got to this stage. There was a night where he held us hostage in the house, and I thought we were all going to die. I didn't think we were going to make it out of that house. There was me, my mum and my 2 sisters, and he locked us in the bedroom upstairs. We could hear what was happening downstairs. We lived in a house where there's like a house on top of a house, and we were in the top house.
Right.
And I was hanging out of the bedroom window. I was only 13, and I was just trying to get someone's attention, but it was really late at night. Anyway, one of our neighbours, she was coming home and she was drunk. So I was shouting down to her to say, like, call the police, we need help. And she called the police came and we got out. But after that, we moved into a women's refuge for women and children to get away from him, because we just couldn't get away from him. So we had a few years of, it was just chaos at home. It was just chaos. There was no stability. We moved house, I think, in 3 years, 20 times, maybe even more. I haven't got any friends from childhood because I was never able to put any roots down anywhere. And I was just constantly terrified that something was going to happen. Anyway, bringing it back to booze, my mum was fine up until that point, but then my mum kind of, I think because she felt like she'd never had a youth, she used to go out, she started going out into town, and she met a doorman and she got into a relationship with this doorman. This doorman was a drug dealer. He used to sell party drugs, cocaine, ecstasy, all that type of thing. And my mum got really into it. She got really heavily into it. And I was 14 and I had my first line of coke with my mum because she gave it me. And I had my first pill from my mum because she gave it me. I left school when I was 14, and I always had this thing where I used to want to be around people that were older than me, and I never hung around with people my age. And I think that's because I never managed to solidify friendships because I was changing school all the time. So my mates were my mum's mates. They were adults. But all my mum's mates at that time were people that were drinking and taking drugs really heavily. And it's all I saw at home. You know, that happened day in, day out. My mum would go on a night out. She'd come home a few days later. I had 2 younger sisters, so I was the eldest. And I had to look after them. I dropped out of school because I had to look after my sisters. In a way, I was parenting the household because I was looking after my sisters. I would go to the supermarket. I would go to the post office to cash my mum's gyro to get the money. I'd buy electric tokens. I'd do everything. And then I'd come home and mum would be partying. And I rejected that as a kid, and I used to call her out on it, and it used to cause us to argue. And I think what happened is she, as a way of handling that rejection, she brought me into the mix. So I started going out with my mum nightclubbing when I was 14. I got into this nightclub that she used to go to all the time because of the bouncer that she was seeing at the time. My mum gave me the coke, my mum gave me the ecstasy. I'd be stood at the bar and, you know, she'd put some speed in my drink and say, there you go, go and have a good time. And and it was really, that was so normal to me. And it became something that, it was almost like I was proud of it. It was like, because she had stature in the club. I'm from a town that's a bit rough, and this club was very rough. And it was the place where, you know, there's nightclubs where people go when they're doing drugs. And it was that place. And my mum was selling all the drugs in there, and people knew that. And in a way, because we'd come from nothing and we'd always had these struggles, in a way it was almost like quite a cool thing. And people used to say to me, oh, it's amazing that you can do drugs with your mum. It's amazing that, you know, your mum's doing this. And at the time I thought it was. I thought it was incredible. And I'm like, God, I'm so lucky. And, you know, my mum used to say to me, oh, I'd rather you do it with me than be doing it off with your mates somewhere, and I don't know where you are. And it kind of, I look back on that now and I have a different view on those types of comments. But at the time I felt it, and it kind of made sense. And I think because we'd gone through so much as a family unit at home with the domestic violence and all of these other things, that felt comfortable and it felt safe. And it's even now in like my late 30s, I look back on that dynamic. And when I say it out loud and I think, I did coke with my mum, I did pills with my mum. There was this event years ago, the Leeds Love Parade. I think I was 15. My mum gave me a bag of pills to sell, to take with me and to sell to my mates. And I was 15 years old. And so I don't think I didn't have the right role model. And I don't think I went through like the correct emotional development and emotional maturity. And so from 14, basically, I got sober when I was 36. So 22 years, I was drinking and using drugs, party drugs, very heavily. I didn't go through a progressive, you know, used to like a few drinks, odd weekend here and there, you know, maybe stay out a bit too late every now and then. From day one, it was, I'll be staying out for 3 days. If I'm going out on Friday, I'm coming home on Sunday. And that was totally normal to me. And I could only ever deal with what was right in front of me. I would lose all concept of time and life and responsibility around me. It would just go, and the focus would be party, party, party. I've learned a lot through treatment and through therapy and through, you know, lots of interventions now, why that's the case. I thought I did just used to like to party, but actually I'm blocking out trauma. I'd never properly matured. I never had a role model. I had all of these abandonment issues, you know, all sorts of stuff going on. And even now I'm still learning about that stuff.
Of course, it takes a long time to like unpick everything from like youth, right? You know, thank you for sharing that with us. Also, I guess just trying to like look at certain stuff. I mean, you do become a product of your environment. Yeah. And, you know, I think especially having like exposure to drink and drugs at such like a young age. Yeah. I guess it felt kind of normal to you if you didn't know anything else.
Yeah. And have you heard of adverse childhood experiences?
No.
So they call it, in psychology, they call it ACE, which is adverse childhood experiences. And those experiences can be physical, emotional, neglect, sexual. There's a whole list of different ones. I'm not the expert, I'm not qualified, but I'm familiar with the model. And I went to a talk, I think it was about 2 years ago, and this guy had written a book about adverse childhood experiences and addiction. And essentially, the very short and simplified summary is, the more adverse childhood experiences that you've got, if there's a tick in the box, add a multiplier for addiction.
Right.
And the multiplier, it compounds, so it gets stronger. So if you've got one, and I'm using this as an example, it's something like 10 times more likely. If you've got 2, 10 becomes 100 times more likely. If you've got 3, then essentially it's inevitable. And I was sat in this talk, and he had this up on a slide, and I looked at, and I think there are about 10. There are quite a lot of different ones. And I was going through the list in my head, and I hit pretty much all of them. You know, there'd been neglect, there'd been physical abuse, there'd been emotional abuse, poverty was one of them, addiction in the home was one of them, sexual abuse, all of these different things. And yeah, in answer to your question, I really had a light bulb moment at that time, because I used to think I was fucked and that I was crazy and that the problem was me and why am I like this? And I saw that and I was like, fucking hell, no wonder I turned out the way that I did. I've been through all of this shit in my childhood, and, you know, don't get me wrong, it's not like I didn't ever know that, and I knew that I'd had difficult experiences, but in a way I'd kind of hidden that stuff under the bonnet. And as an addict, I would do anything to shirk personal responsibility. I would not take responsibility for my addictive behaviours, for the consequences of my addictive behaviours. I was a nightmare. I was causing people pain all the time. I was a nightmare with, if someone made plans with me, I wouldn't show up, or I'd show up and I'd be high or I'd be drunk. It was to be in a relationship with me, a friend with me, as a member of my family. I was a very difficult person, but it was never my fault, because in my head I used to say to myself, well, if you'd had my life, and I think it's okay to validate that and say, yeah, you've had a difficult life and you needed to self-medicate through whatever process, but also it can't be an excuse for all of that poor behaviour. But most of all, the poor behaviour towards yourself. Like, it doesn't make sense, does it? If I put myself through all of that, why am I putting myself through more with addiction? It's really like a conflicting position.
I think there's so often with that, though, isn't it, that you're running away from facing the truth that alcohol, substances, addiction just feels like that mask, and you can become in that moment whoever you want to be and present however you want to be.
Yeah.
And I know for me, it took me so long to like unpick, you know, addiction with parenthood and all those things that kind of run away from you when you're younger. Yeah. And you just create this like version, and everyone's like, oh, what a fun guy, you're fun. And you're like, you don't see the tornado that's here and like behind me.
Yeah.
How did it for you then play out? Because obviously, like, you know, you have to live life, you have to make money, you have to build relationships with people.
Yeah.
So you've obviously had this kind of crazy period of like, you know, doing drugs, selling drugs, etc. How did that play into like when you then hit normal, quote unquote, drinking age and studying? Did you study? Like, what did life look like for you in those periods, and how did your 20s look?
Somehow I managed to wing it really well, and my nan always used to say to me, you're like a cat with 9 lives. You always land on your feet. In any situation, you always land on your feet. In fact, she said to me, you've got a charmed life. And I'd be thinking, fucking hell, I've had an awful life.
If this is charmed, fuck me.
Jesus. So there's everything that I've just said in terms of I'm a nightmare, I was chaos, the drama, all of it was with me. But then there's a flip side to that in which, because of what I'd come from and because of what I'd seen at home and what I used to see in terms of the type of people that my mum hung out with and all of that, that was fuel for me to not want that. And I was really motivated by money because we never had any money. So I left school at 14. I had a washing up job. I worked at the local pub. I had 3 paper rounds. I was bloody selling fake bus tickets at school for like £7 a pop, and these bus tickets were meant to be like a tenner or whatever, so I was making a bit of cash on that. And I used to make fake IDs and sell fake IDs, so
entrepreneurial.
Yeah, I was always very entrepreneurial, and a lot of that money that I used to make from those little side hustles at 13, 14 went back into the family. It was for shopping, it was for, my mum would spend all the money on drugs and we'd have no money left, and we'd be like, shit, what's for tea? And I'd use that money to buy super noodles, to go buy whatever we needed from the supermarket. So I think I always had this, I was always very money motivated, and I've got a fear of not having enough money, of running out of money. I looked scruffy at school. I got picked on for looking scruffy. Other kids used to go on holidays. We didn't go on holidays. And, you know, I remember coming back after some holidays and I'd feel just different. And that feeling of feeling different is something that stuck with me throughout my whole life. Like, I feel different because of my sexuality. I feel different because I'm an addict. I've been diagnosed with ADHD this year. So even this year, I've been feeling like, oh, fucking hell, there's something else that, you know, I've got to come out now and say that I've got this thing. But I was always really driven by not ending up where my mum ended up. And I want to talk about my mum with compassion because I do still have a relationship with her. And although I used to resent the things that we experienced and what happened, now that I've gone through my own therapy and my own treatment, I've got compassion for my mum because she was a hurt person. She still is a hurt person. She still struggles. And I think she did the best with what she had at the time. But I'm still like comfortable saying I never wanted what she had, and I wanted to make sure that I had some sort of life, whatever that was. School didn't work for me. You know, academically, lessons, I was a nightmare at school. I really struggled with my attention, and the moment that a kid would laugh at me, then that was it. I was a class clown. And that stayed with me in addiction, like going out, going to the club, going to parties, going to afters. I would take pride in making people laugh and going the furthest with the drugs. Who can do the most drugs? Who can do like the stupidest size of coke, line size of coke, whatever it might be. And again, I've learned through my ADHD diagnosis that there are a lot of things that have fueled that for me, because I've got a real sensitivity to rejection, and I love to be accepted and I love to be validated. And so that was driving a lot of what was happening at school when I was a kid, but also as a grown-up in addiction. So I was driven by money, I was driven by success. I left school when I was 14 and I got a job just working in an office as an office junior, making cups of tea. And slowly but surely managed to just get enough experience around behind me to do things that paid better. And my motivator was, I used to look for jobs when I was younger, so late teens, early 20s, based on the salary, not what the job was. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I couldn't go to university because I haven't got any GCSEs because I dropped out of school. And I knew that environment wasn't for me anyway. So I got some experience behind me working in office jobs, and then I went away to be a holiday rep for 4 years.
Nice.
Worked all over the bloody world, worked in the Caribbean, lived in all-inclusive hotels, so I had access to booze 24/7, which was obviously fucking marvellous.
Yeah.
And got in a lot of trouble as well as a holiday rep, because I was always doing things that I shouldn't have been doing. when I was pissed up, basically.
Did you, sorry to interrupt, but I'm just intrigued at this point, did you know your relationship with alcohol was unhealthy, or were you still in this sort of like fight or flight mode of just surviving?
I had no idea. Yeah, I had no idea. I was more concerned about just having fun. I was so carefree. You know, like friends that you call if you want a certain type of night out. That was me.
Yeah.
And it was me because I was fun. It was me because I would last the longest. And it was me because I'd pay for everything. Because I'd want to keep those people there. And if someone started saying, oh, I'm going to go now, or, you know, it's getting a bit shit, or it's getting a bit late, I've got work tomorrow, I'd get another bag in, or I'd go to the bar and like run to the bar, get some shots and get some drinks in. And I was almost coercing people to be my friend and to stay out with me. And I had no idea that was problematic. And I think something happens as well when you're in that, where you attract like-minded people. And I could walk into a room, a bar, a club, and it would take me 5-10 minutes to find the person that was like me, that wanted to get on it like I got on it. Like, oh, you get on it? Yeah, like, we're going to hang out tonight.
Let's fucking go.
Yeah, let's go. I've met them in the smoking area, talking absolute shit. I've told them about my childhood trauma. We're getting on it and we're going to someone's house. And I didn't know. I just thought I'd like to have a good time. Because the consequences for me, they weren't really there at the start. I was just having fun. And like the mental health consequences, they didn't come until probably my late 20s.
Wow.
So all throughout my like early 20s, mid 20s, it was party.
You didn't really suffer the kind of the hangovers and the...
I used to boast about it. It was a badge of honour. Yeah. I can drink for 3 days solid. I don't get a hangover.
So what age were you when you were the sort of holiday rep?
So I was holiday rep from like 19 to 22, 23. And then I came back to the UK, moved to Leeds. Leeds has got a crazy house music scene. Met lots of like working professionals. I was working in recruitment. You get paid a shit ton of money in recruitment. And we would finish work, go over the road to Greek Street where all the wine bars were, get Coke, get wine, and that was it. And that was every night of the week. It could be Monday night and that's what we were doing.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like, I loved it. You know, I loved it. And I've had some difficult times in addiction, but I've had some fucking brilliant times. And when I first got into recovery, in my first year, I used to talk quite differently. And I used to almost just like put a negative on everything. And it was like, no, it's ruined my life. And it did ruin my life. But I couldn't talk about periods of my life drinking and taking drugs positively or with any fondness. I really struggled with that because it had taken me to suicidal ideation. You know, it had taken me to really dark places and to rock bottom. So I used to struggle in that first year or so with having any like fond memories because I just didn't have any. But I think now I've got a few years in and, you know, I can look back like in this conversation and say, do you know what? In Leeds, in my early 20s, I had a bloody brilliant time.
Yeah.
You know, me and my mates getting on it. We go to the club at the weekend. You used to see amazing DJs, go to the afters. Monday morning, I was right as rain and I'd go back to work. But I think it helped that going back to work, I was in an environment where you could drink and take Coke.
Yes, like,
you know?
What a heavy weekend. Maybe we should go, oh, yeah, more? You're like, yeah, let's
You used to do it in the boardroom.
Yeah, I mean, you must have found it quite liberating in some ways that actually, you know, from the sounds of it, you know, having that kind of responsibility at home during your childhood of like looking after your sisters and essentially being, from the sounds of it, like the grown-up of the family, going to an environment where suddenly you're earning money, being a holiday rep, and then going in Leeds, and then, you know, suddenly getting money for the first time, you know, properly going into recruitment where I know there's a big like drink and drug culture. Yeah. But from the sounds of it, you know, you were having fun and actually, you know, not having those responsibilities to like maybe look after siblings and actually just going wild. Must have been quite liberating. Yeah,
it was letting my hair down, and it was, I always say, like, you know, people go to uni and they have their uni years. I kind of felt like those were my uni years where I just went a bit wild. The problem was it carried on, and it took me a long time to realise that how I did it just wasn't how everyone else was doing it, or everyone else stopped doing it when they got to a certain age. You know,
right.
People start getting into relationships, getting married, having kids, saying things like, no, you know, work, I need to knuckle down at work now, all that type of thing. And I'm a bit like Peter Pan, like I just don't want to grow up. And in lots of ways, I still feel like a little boy, and I think that's probably because I haven't fully grown up. And I think there's some like attachment to my youth and the things that I've experienced. And so it was very liberating. And also back to being motivated by like money and success and status. I come from a family that, you know, we live in a small town. Everyone lives within a few streets of each other. People don't leave our town. They don't move out of it. And so I was like, it was like, oh, Karl's moved to the city. Like he lives in Leeds and he's got this job in an office, and, you know, I could pay for my own holidays. And my first holiday was to Ibiza. And,
nice.
It's
almost like the status thing, like from back home going, look, I'm doing well.
Yeah, it was. And it was, I remember I used to think about that and think about the fact that I didn't have any GCSEs and I left school when I was 14. And so I was proud of it, but I took it too far. I always took it too far. And I would get through a lot of friends and acquaintances, you know. So I've never really had lots of close friends. I used to know a lot of people. In Leeds, when I lived in Leeds, I've lived in Manchester a long time now. I'd go out and I'd know everyone. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, all the doormen, all the people behind the bars. You know, I could get anything sorted basically, and because I'd make friends with anyone and chat with anyone because my life was going out. I love going out, but I didn't really have those kind of long-term childhood friends. Those people that perhaps are going to say, you know, maybe you need to stop now, or like, are you okay? And don't get me wrong, I gradually met some people like that in my life, and I had friends eventually towards the end that tried to do, you know, interventions, that type of thing, and they didn't work.
How did you respond to that?
Oh God, I hated it. Do you know how I responded? Actually, I completely isolated myself. Because I just thought, fuck you. If that's what you're going to do, I'm just going to drink and take drugs by myself. So I really rejected it. And what I learned is you have to want to make that change yourself. You have to be ready to make that change, and you have to want to really, really, really seriously do it. Other people saying to you, you're drinking too much, or you pissed me off with this situation, you know, whatever those things are, because those things start to happen quite a lot. And I had a couple of really good friends that just completely stopped talking to me. And I had one friend, and he just said, I am not going to hang around and watch you kill yourself, because that's what's happening. But I was selfish and I didn't care, because my priority was drinking and getting high. And, you know, I still carry some guilt and some shame for that stuff. And I've made amends with people and I've had conversations, but I look back on a lot of situations and just think, yeah, I have some regret, basically.
Do you think like those, I guess, like interventions / conversations might have planted some like seeds for your recovery?
Yeah, 100%. I was in like, I think they call it pre-contemplation stage. And I used to Google, when I was off my tits, I used to Google, am I an alcoholic? Am I a drug addict? Things like that. And I'd read page after page, and, you know, I'd read on the AA website, and I'd read like blogs or news articles, all that type of thing. And I'd go through these articles and I'd read this content, And I'd look for, in this whole article, I'd look for the one thing, the one sentence that was something that I didn't do. And that was enough for me to like hook onto that thing and go, oh no, I'm not. I don't do that. I don't drink in the morning, so I'm not an alcoholic. I haven't been to prison. And I go to AA meetings and we talk about the yets. So people say, oh, well, you haven't done that yet, but it's progressive and it will come. And there was a time when I didn't used to drink in the mornings, but at the end of my addiction, I did. I used to go over to the shop at 7:00 when it opened, opposite my apartment. I used to buy wine. And I always said that I'd never do that because that would mean I was an alcoholic. So, yeah, it planted a seed for sure. And I think I tried to block that out. You know, one of my classic addict behaviors is avoidance. And so every time I would start to get into it a bit too much, I'd just avoid it.
Yeah. I was going to ask, like, what, if you don't mind sharing, like, what did your alcohol and substance abuse look like towards the end of your taking? And sort of, was there a light bulb moment or a rock bottom moment? Kind of what led you to the point where you thought, I've got to deal with this?
Got to do something. There were a few things. The peak for me was COVID. So I lost my job during COVID because I'd just gone like way off the rails, and I'd worked myself up into very senior roles in corporate companies. So I was working at a tech company. I was the head of HR at this tech company, and you know, I'd call in sick once a week because I'd been out on the sesh, or I'd be working from home, or I'd come into work and I'd still be high, and I'd sit in a meeting room all day doing deep work. And basically it was me avoiding people because I couldn't make eye contact with people, and I didn't want people to smell me because I would have stunk. But somehow I still managed to like hold down these positions. And COVID hit, and we obviously all got sent home, and I lived alone. And by this time I'd really isolated myself from a lot of my friends. So I had like one or two friends that I was still in communication with, but I was just off doing my own thing. And yeah, I just saw it as an opportunity to use however I wanted to. And I think with COVID, lots of people went one way or the other. Some people flourished, and it was like, oh, I stopped drinking, and you know, I picked up crochet and I learnt a language, and we're doing quizzes and like online dinner parties and all of this stuff. And that did not happen for me.
Snap.
Yeah. It got very dark, and I was waiting for the shop to open at 7:00 in the morning. And I had this weird thing where I still had like so much ego. I'd go to the co-op to buy wine to drink for the rest of the day. I'd been on it all night, doing coke all night. And because I was earning good money, I had like an all right wage and stuff. I'd go buy 3 bottles of Chateauneuf de Pape because I'd think, oh, they won't know. And then I'd make a point of saying to like the person on the till, it's for a dinner party, or I've got friends coming round, or bullshit, we're all isolating, we weren't allowed to see anybody. But I was still in that much denial, and I still had that much ego that I was trying to hide it. So I was drinking about 3 bottles of wine a day, and I was using cocaine around the clock. So I would go and meet my dealer 2-3 times a day. I spent tens of thousands of pounds. I got myself into a crazy amount of debt. I was very physically unwell. So I had like swelling in my tummy. I used to get really regular nosebleeds. I've got a deviated septum. All of the stuff just started to happen because I was doing it constantly. And it got to the point where I would hallucinate and I wouldn't know where I was. And I was in my apartment, and I would come round and I wouldn't have a clue where I was. And I'd be on my sofa in my living room with my curtains drawn. And at that point, I just didn't want to live. I didn't want to live. And I used to, I used to think about suicide a lot. And I had this situation where I wanted to end it, but I was really scared of dying. Like, death is one of my biggest fears, and I think it comes from all that childhood stuff. I constantly thought we were going to die. My stepdad used to say he was going to burn the house down with us in it all the time. So we used to sleep with, we used to put a bucket of water underneath the letterbox, so that he couldn't pour petrol through the letterbox, and if he did, it would go into the bucket of water and not into the carpet, and it would give us a chance of survival. And so I've always had this fear of death, but in those final years of addiction, I just wasn't bothered, and I used to pray that I wouldn't come round from my next session, that right, this is going to be it this time. I'm gonna have a heart attack. You hear about it all the time, people doing too much coke. When you mix alcohol and cocaine, it creates this additional drug in your system. I can't remember the name of it, but it's lethal basically, and it can kill you. And I used to think about that all the time. And I used to think, I hope that happens. And I used to get myself into these states, and I'd start texting my funeral songs to my friends and say, this is what I want playing at my funeral. And yeah, it got really dark, and that's a lot to put on other people, right? But that went on for years. And I had a situation where I was in one of those periods, and I'd been on it for about 3-4 days, and I tied a belt around my neck, and I was sat in I had like a plate of cocaine and a belt around my neck, and I was sat figuring out how to attach it to the light fitting. And I put on my Facebook, oh, I'm really sorry for letting you all down. And literally about 15 minutes later, 2 of my friends came into the apartment, because obviously they'd seen it and they were worried. And they took me to hospital, and I was seen by the psych team at the hospital. And that was when I really started to think, fuck, I need to change. I need to do something different. But I still wasn't fully there. And a systematic thing happened with, the NHS is amazing, but this thing happened where I got the attention, and the psych team saw me, and they were like, right, you're going to get all this help that you need. We've expedited your referral for therapy, and we're going to get you straight into therapy. You don't need to go on the waiting list and all of this stuff. And the following week, I came out of hospital. The following week, I went to this therapy session, and they told me that I couldn't continue the therapy because I was taking drugs, and that I had to be of a clear mind for the therapy to work. I was like, well, I'm here because of an attempted suicide, and because I'm addicted to drugs. I need help and support, but I can't get it because I'm taking drugs. Like, what the fuck do I do?
Yeah, what am I going to do?
And so they referred me to a drug and alcohol service, to a local drug and alcohol service. And I'll never forget this. I rocked up, and I didn't want to go. One of my best friends, Anna, who has just been the one constant in my life that all the way through this, she's got me there. She made me go, and I remember sitting down with this person in this appointment, and after everything that I've just described, that had all happened within the same few weeks. This lady goes to me, okay, so what are we doing? Is it moderation or total abstinence? And I was like, fuck yes, moderation please. I'll have moderation. Please teach me how to do that.
Wow.
And I remember coming out of there feeling really proud because I was doing it, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm in services and I'm going to moderate. And it lasted a month. I went to these services for a month. I found myself a private therapist because the NHS therapist thing didn't work out. And she was an addiction specialist, and she was an ex-heroin addict herself, and she'd been like 20 years clean. And I was like, yes, I put everything on this woman. She's going to save me. Like, this is all going to get sorted. And I'd go to the therapy sessions, and they'd be so heavy going through like the childhood trauma. I'd come out, and on my walk home, I'd call my dealer because I deserved to get off my face. It'd be like, God, that was a lot. Like, I need something to take the pain away. And it was like a reward. It's like a reward-based thing, right? Which just makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
But I didn't love myself enough, and I didn't care about myself enough to want to make the change. So I had a few situations like that, and then during COVID, I got a call from my friend Anna, and she said, her words to me were, "I am waiting for the police to ring me to tell me that I've got to come and identify your body. That is every day. That is the phone call that I'm waiting for." And for whatever reason, I heard it, and I didn't hear it because I was thinking about the fact that I might die. She thought I might die. What I heard was, that's what I was putting my best friend through.
Yeah.
She was, she's a head teacher in a school, and she's got her own life, and she's waiting for someone to ring her to say, "Can you come and identify Karl's body? We think he's dead." So that got through, and so I engaged in some services. The LGBT Foundation, I reached out to them. I think maybe a whole separate conversation, but drink and drug use in the queer community is a massive thing. And, my drink and drug use wasn't just going to the club, it was the afters, sex parties, all of that. There was so much interwoven with it all. And so I felt comfortable reaching out to the LGBT Foundation, and they got me a support worker. And basically they said, right, you've got 6 sessions. In these 6 sessions, it's 1 a week. If you can demonstrate a reduction in your using, we might be able to get you onto a treatment path. We might be able to get you into detox or into rehab. I wasn't allowed to stop drinking. They told me categorically, do not stop drinking, because you could have a seizure, something serious might happen. And so it was still during COVID. So I was seeing this support worker on Zoom, and I was lying. I'd engaged in the services, but at that point it was close to me getting sober, but I was still being dishonest. And I remember I'd had this session with him about halfway through, so it must have been about 3 sessions. And he was like, "Yeah, you're not really reducing. Every week I ask you what you've been doing, and it's the same. We're not going to be able to continue or recommend." And he was like, "Right." He'd always say to me, "What's your plan for the next few days?" I remember saying to him, "Oh, I've got 5 bags of Coke in my fruit bowl on the coffee table," which I did. So he was like, "Right, pour that away now whilst I'm on this Zoom call. Get rid of it. You have to get rid of it." And I was like, "I'm not getting rid of it. I've spent a fortune on that. That's 250 quid. And I pretended to get rid of all this Coke, down the kitchen sink. And I didn't. I finished the call and I just carried on doing it. But through that process, they sent me to the doctors, and I had to get some blood tests, and I had to speak to an alcohol nurse, a lady called Jean, that I'll never forget. And lovely Jean took my bloods, and when my results came back, she said to me, "You probably think I'm saying this because of my job and because of what I do, but if you keep drinking and taking drugs at the level you are now, you will not see 40. You will be dead in a few years, and your parents are going to come to your funeral." And yeah, suddenly I was faced with this conflict of, at the time I wanted to die, but then a nurse saying to you, "No, you are going to die."
It's like a mirror to your immortality.
Yeah, literally. And I heard that, and that happened within a few weeks of my friend Anna saying what she'd been experiencing. So there were a couple of things that happened, and that I eventually got on a treatment path. My blood results weren't great. They got me a place at detox. Now, when you get into a detox centre, you go for a week and you medically detox. You have to be transported from your home to the detox centre in an ambulance in case you have a seizure. And I refused to, because again, maybe ego, maybe shame. I was just like, there is no way I'm having an ambulance pull up outside my building and I'm getting into it for you to take me to a detox centre. I walked there and they were like, "Well, we can't do that." So I refused to go to the detox centre because of perceptions, basically. Because I was, even though all this stuff was going on, I was very good at hiding it. Only really my close friends knew what was happening. So I medically detoxed at home. They gave me a prescription. I had to go get the medication, and I had to stay on that medication for 6 months. So I went through like 10 days of hell at home where I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, shakes, all the usual stuff, just withdrawal essentially from alcohol and cocaine. And then they got me onto a treatment path. So I did something called community rehab, which is essentially outpatients rehab. And you go in the day, but you come home at night. And when you go back, you get breathalyzed and you have to do a pee test to make sure that you've not been using. Yeah, it's quite tricky because you get let loose at the end of the day.
Yeah. So I guess your typical neural pathway there was reward, right? So in old money, you would have been like, fuck, I've done it.
Yeah.
So that must have been a real test.
It was a real test, but back to what I said earlier, I was finally at the point where I just couldn't do it anymore. I just
wanted to
couldn't
submit to it.
Yeah, I had to.
I'm out.
Yeah, and people, I love the saying like the gift of desperation, and I was desperate.
Yeah.
I was desperate. I couldn't bear the way that I felt about myself, the way that I treated myself and treated other people, and I didn't really want to die. And so I was at that point of, I thought I'd reached rock bottoms before, but I was definitely at my final rock bottom. And, you know, things started to change. And day by day, going to treatment and doing the work, you know, in treatment, you do your life story and you literally go back to day dot from as far back as you can remember. And in your group, you share everything, and they say no stone unturned, leave no stone unturned. And I shared things in that room that I've never shared with anyone. I'd never told anyone that I'd been sexually abused. I was sexually abused by a boy, and that's why I grew up thinking I was gay, because a boy sexually abused me. So my shame attached to my sexuality was compounded by this abuse, not just the fact that my sexuality was what it was. So yeah, it was the first time really that I ever started to face that stuff and have the realizations that actually I'm not just a party boy. All of this stuff has happened in my life that is environmental, that is contextual, and that has contributed to my behaviours and the way that I am.
Yeah. How long were you there for, the sort of outpatient rehabilitation?
So it started in January 2021 and I came out in June, so 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
So how, at the end of that 6 months, were you kind of given sort of resources to kind of take out? You felt equipped to kind of face the world?
AA basically. Yeah. But I didn't engage with AA for about 3 months. So right. My group leader kept saying, he used to call me arrogant. He was like, get to AA, you need to go to AA, rehab's not going to keep you clean. And I was just like, I don't want to go. And I had all these perceptions that it was about God and that, I'm a bit ashamed to say I thought it was like picture a man on the street with a paper bag and a bottle, that type of thing. And it's really judgmental of me. And I think it's actually also part of when we grow up in society, the word alcoholic, what we connect that to. And actually, when I go to an AA meeting, I'm surrounded by everyday people that come from all walks of life. That, you know, and so AA was the thing that in classic ADHD stroke addict behavior, I threw myself into it. So I became the I became the AA poster boy, and it was like, doing service at meetings, making cups of tea. Like, no, making cups of tea is not enough. I want to chair these meetings, and I want to roll, and like I want, just driven by purpose. Embracing it. Yeah. And I was 6 months in, and I was chairing 3 or 4 different meetings regularly. And Manchester's got quite a lot of gay meetings, which is amazing. So, because I just thought gay community, drink and drugs, but actually there's this whole sober gay community, and it really became my thing. And I did the steps, and I got a sponsor, and I was at the point where I was so desperate for change. You could have told me to do anything and I would have done it. I'm like, yeah, please fix me. Like, please get me over the line. What do I need to do to get better? And that's what I did. I just threw myself into it.
Amazing. And after that kind of, so AA, you probably, 9 months sober before you fully went into it?
I was about 6 months. I started. I think that's when I started getting properly into it, and I started going to more meetings, and stopped being resistant to it, because I was very resistant to some of the language that is used in AA and that type of thing. And at the end of the day, I remember my sponsor at the time. I've got a different one now. Just saying, even if you don't believe it, just do it. Do you want to be sober? Yeah. Do you believe in some of this language that's written in this book that was, it's from 80 years ago? Probably not, because it's based on religion. But is it going to keep you sober? Probably. So just do it.
Yeah.
And there's accountability and community as well, right?
Yeah. And I got so much from that. You know, for me, sometimes people say, meetings won't keep you clean, but they really did keep me clean, because sat in a room full of people, I was amazed by it at first, sat in a room full of people that walk in and just go, this is what's going on for me. Here's my life story. This is what I'm dealing with. And, the vulnerability in that is just incredible. And that's where you start to hear people say things that are part of your makeup and that are part of your psyche. And I used to think that I was terminally unique. So if you'd had my life, no one drinks like me, no one does drugs like me. Again, ego and all of that. And you go into a meeting room, and it's really humbling and grounding, because I was like, all these people are like me. And that's one meeting, and there's thousands of meetings all over the world happening all the time. And the one thing that really got me, I'll never forget my very first meeting. And at the start of a meeting, they say, before we start the meeting, we're just going to take a moment to pause for the still suffering alcoholic, both in and outside the room. And that makes me emotional now, even saying those words, because it makes me think of when I was in deep active addiction at home, wanting to die. People were sat in meetings praying for me, pausing and taking a moment for alcoholics that are struggling right now. So I think it's been an amazing part of my recovery, and I was fully in it for a few years. Now I'm less in it, and I think I've picked up a lot of the tools and the techniques, and I let go of my resentments, and I practice gratitude, and I don't get on my knees and pray. I don't believe in God and higher power. I'm kind of I think the universe has got its way, and there's a bit of a plan somewhere, and I'm happy to keep myself in check with that. But that's as far as it's going. I think you use it in the way that you need it at the time. And now I've learned more about myself in terms of, I've been a bit of a cliche. I've got really into fitness, and, I'm obsessed with running, weight training, spin classes, breath work, cold water therapy.
Who are you?
I roll, bloody hell. But I really have, because amazing. I love how it makes me feel.
And I think you have to, right?
Yeah.
You have to embrace all of this stuff that gives us the kind of the highs in a different, healthy way.
Yeah.
Where you understand what it's doing and why, and so it's great. And it's an amazing story that you've got, up until the point. And can I just say, I'm glad you are here.
Thank you.
And for the wonderful flowers that you bought us, which
I know, the kindest thing anyone's ever.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love it.
Because men don't buy men flowers.
I know.
Right?
I love that.
Beautiful.
So, but no, it's it's an amazing story, and more power to you for finding what works. And we're big advocates for every type of recovery tool there is, including AA. Yeah. And whilst we haven't used it as a resource for us and hadn't needed to, for a lot of people, it has been an amazing resource tool, and gets people through the darkest days, and
it really does.
Out the other side, which is amazing. So
you have recently been running an alcohol-free bar in Manchester, right, called Love From. So let's try and succinct this, but I'd love to hear about it and the amazing things it's done, but also I guess the challenges that come with trying to break into what is a ever more exciting space, but still yet to be adopted fully by the wider people.
Yeah. Very well put. It's been wild. It's been wild. So threw away my corporate career. I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And I think something happens when you get sober where you just start to live a life that's more aligned to what you actually want to do with your life. It's like, I'm not going through the biggest thing that I've ever experienced to just do a run-of-the-mill corporate job that I don't care about. But I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I quit my job, and I went to Croatia for a month on holiday, and I came back and said to my friends, I'm going to open an alcohol-free bar. And they were like, what? I was like, yeah, I think like I knew of the one in London of Club Soda, and you know, I was always such a social person. And don't get me wrong, I'm fine going out to normal bars and clubs now. It doesn't bother me in the slightest because I know what I like. And if there are things that I'm not into, I just don't go to them. Yeah. Whereas before, like I'd go to anything and, I'd be at the opening of an envelope. Yeah. Whereas now it's like, no, I'm not really into that. I'm not going to go. I just thought it can be a little project. Let's see how it goes. I knew somebody that worked for a company that had a space that was becoming available for 2 weeks. And that was in the October of 2023. So perfect timing. Lots of people doing Sober October. I started writing to like brands and lots of other companies locally to say, hey, I'm doing this 2-week pop-up. Do you want to do a collaboration? And because nobody knew who we were. Sure. It was like, right, how am I going to get some traction with this? I think I need to use other brands and work with other brands to get people through the door. And yeah, it just blew up. It blew up. We did an event with Manchester Pride, which was amazing. We did an event with Sober Girls Society with Millie, and it was amazing. And people just loved it. And, I was really focused on good drinks because although things are getting better with non-alc, still lots of bars, your option might be a certain brand of 0% lager that is not very good. Or a mocktail. I don't like the word mocktail. Yeah. I don't use the word mocktail. That is essentially juice and sugar. So I was like, no, I want to show people that you can have elevated drinks and that you can have choice. And people come into the bar and they look at the menu and we've got like 23 cocktails on the menu and they're like, oh my God, I've never seen so many non-alc drinks. It's amazing. So like the drink, in my mind, if you're going to put your hat on, right, I'm opening an alcohol-free bar, the product has to be king. It has to be amazing. People have to come and have that drink and go, fucking hell, that's one of the best drinks I've ever had. Because if that doesn't happen, they're not going to come back. So it's really focused on getting the drinks right. But then also the vibe. And we've got a little saying at Love From, which is cutting out isn't missing out. And that comes from this whole like perception that, oh, you're not drinking, is it not boring? And like, do you have to stay in now? And don't get me wrong, I do prefer to stay in these days. But you can still go have a great night out. Of course. Without booze. And obviously, we know that now. So I wanted to really focus on the experience, and part of the, I guess like the business model or the setup was that we'd have regular events. So we had quiz night, open mic night. On a Saturday afternoon, we'd have acoustic music. We had DJs, and then we'd do like crafty nights. Like you always see these sip and paint nights where it's Prosecco and wine and painting, and everyone just gets pissed basically. It's not really a creative outlet. So it's like, no, let's do that, but do it non-alc. And yeah, it was great. People loved it. So we did a 2-week pop-up Sober October. Went really well, got loads of traction. They said at the venue that we're in, they were like, right, it's available for a few months in the first quarter of 2024. Do you want to come down? So I said, yeah, we'd do a little bit of a residency. And it blew up. There was a reel that went out when we launched in January for Dry January. And it got 13 million views on Twitter. And I didn't know this had happened. And I think I'd been like out busy or whatever working. And I got back to my laptop and I just had all these media requests in my inbox. And it was like, oh, Daily Mail, this, The Times, this, The Telegraph, this. And people were like referencing like the Twitter comments. And I was like, shit, what Twitter comments? What are you talking about? What's happened? Bloody hell. And there was a bit of backlash on Twitter, as there always is on Twitter.
I was going to say, it's like
very polarised
to the void.
Yeah, just trolls.
Angry white men.
Yeah,
What's the point if you're drinking?
You're fucking drunk, mate. Why are you girl?
So you mean a coffee shop then? No, because we don't sell fucking coffee for a start. What's the point? Like, you might as well open a vegan butcher's.
But that's what creates virality, right? Is the both sides.
Well, it did. Yeah, it worked. And from that, Richie Anderson from the BBC One Show rang me. Phone rang. Oh, it's Richie Anderson. Do you want to come on the One Show? Davina McCall picked us up. We were on we got coverage on loads of massive Instagram accounts. And yeah, it was just I was like, what is happening?
Yeah, that's great.
What is happening? So yeah, that was the start of this year, and we were a pop-up, and the pop-up kept getting extended because it was doing quite well. And but it started to become a bit of a challenge in that people aren't going to non-alc bars all the time. You know, if I think about my own behaviour as a sober person, you know, part of the customer profile, I do like staying in, and I'll go out once a month. And also, the economics are different. So people go into a bar on a Friday night after work drinking alcohol. They might have 3, 4, 5 drinks. If it were me, 10 to 15. People come to an alcohol-free bar and they'll buy 1 or 2 drinks max.
And I guess it's that tough thing as well of me and you would be stoked on an alcohol-free bar, so we might go there after this and have a couple of drinks. But if I was trying to meet 3 of my mates from school, they'd be like, fuck, we going there? And even if I was like, oh, come and have a vibe, I know even going to the Lucky Saint pub in Marylebone, which still sells booze, my mates would be like, why are we going there? So it's usually sober people I meet there. So I guess it's although it's becoming a bigger thing, it narrows down. Yeah. And I guess money-wise, you still have, it's not because it's still really expensive to drink non-alc, even if you're trying to make it cheaper, right?
And that's a massive challenge. You know, there's a lot of education needed around the drink prices, because we'd get a lot of... we wouldn't really get this feedback from sober people, because sober people get it. But from people outside of that circle, they'd think the drinks were too expensive. And it's like, look, I'm using alcohol-free spirits in all of these drinks. It costs me the same to make that as it would if it had proper vodka in it.
It takes education.
I paid $7.90 for a fucking 0 pint somewhere the other day, and I was just
$7.90.
It's London, baby.
Wow.
But do you know what I mean? You're just but it is what I wanted it, so I bought it. But I can imagine my mates be like, "Fuck,
it was a challenge. It was a challenge, and I was in Manchester City Centre, so there was a lot of competition. There's lots going on event wise, and you know it started to become financially very tight. And because we had so much exposure, people were reaching out to us all the time to do events. We've started doing corporate events. So I've done pop-ups in Amazon's head office, Boohoo, Pretty Little Thing. We've done festivals. We were at Park Life Festival, you know.
Yeah, sick. That sounds like the vibe.
Yeah, 90,000 young people getting on it at Park Life Festival, and I was like, how is this gonna go? And do you know what's amazing? The mindset, and generalizing a little bit, but the mindset of that demographic of people, even the ones that were getting on it, clearly getting on it, they were like, oh, I love it, this is fucking amazing. And I've got this placard that I take around at festivals with me, and I get right into the crowd, and it says cutting out isn't missing out. And I was in Scream was DJing, I think, and I was in the middle of this set, and I had this, and all the kids were going, what does it mean, mate? What's cutting out? What are you cutting out? I'm like, oh, I've cut out booze and drugs. And they were like, oh, that's sick. That's amazing. So yeah, it's been really interesting from just a market research perspective, in terms of what people want and the way that it's going. And although we brought the pop-up to an end, non-alc isn't going anywhere. It's growing year on year, and consumer behaviour, people are drinking less and less, particularly young people. You know, there's all this research out there with Gen Z, and we saw that reflected in our customer base. And I was a right nosy get. When people came into the bar, I'd be like, oh, what brought you here? And you'd never say to someone oh, are you sober? Or ask them anything too intrusive, but people would just naturally share. And the amount of times I just hear people saying, I just don't like alcohol, or I just don't want to drink as much. You know, we used to get a lot of people that were sober curious, and they just want a weekend off, or they just want a night off. But that being said, even with all of that like momentum, running a venue in the current economic climate
tough
is really hard.
Yeah.
Running an alcohol-free venue in the current economic climate,
well done for giving it a go. And it sounds like
we're big supporters, and we're gutted because we were actually, full disclosure to our listeners, we're going to come and do our first Northern live show at your space, but time-wise, festivals.
We'll figure something
We're
out.
going to figure something out.
With you.
We'll figure something out, because what's actually happened as a byproduct of the pop-up is we've built this amazing brand.
Yeah.
And I get messages every day on Instagram from people saying, I had one yesterday morning actually, a guy saying, I've just hit 1 year sober and I just want to say thank you. This page has been a massive help. And we've kind of inadvertently become more than a venue. We've become something that people look to for like inspiration and motivation. And, you know, people share a lot quite vulnerably on Instagram, and managing our socials has been as much as managing the actual bar itself. Yeah. And so there's loads more that we're going to do.
We'll do it.
Yeah,
we will do it. Right, you're looking at me like it's time. I'm getting told off for timing. Okay.
So the big three. So for anyone going on a journey of sobriety and thinking about it, what's your single best piece of advice?
When you start to talk about removing something, you're starting on like negative language immediately, right? It's like, remove this, stop drinking alcohol. And so it instantly creates this mindset of like a lack of something, like a scarceness of something. And I think that's what happens with these perceptions of, you're not drinking, it must be dull, it must be boring. And that's why I bang on about it so much with Love From, and I'm like, cutting out isn't missing out. And my best piece of advice is totally flip that mindset, because you are gaining so much. For me, cutting out alcohol is not about losing anything, it's about abundance, because what I've got in return from removing that one thing from my life, and I get that my experience is very specific, and for a lot of people it won't connect because I was really far down the scale. But even if you're just toying with the idea, my advice is don't think about the scarceness. You've got so much more to gain from it. And be like really radically curious. Be so curious. Listen to podcasts. Watch content online. Just immerse yourself in it, because the more you do that, the more you'll get what I get from meeting rooms, which is that identification with other people, and the more that it will start to feel like you can make a change, and like a change will be appealing. Yeah, so don't make a mountain out of it.
Love that.
Good advice.
Very good.
I like that. What is the single best thing that sobriety has brought you?
It's given me the controls back. I was on like a rocket ship heading in one direction, full of fuel, never coming back, and I had no control over it. You know, ground speed was out of this world. I now have got personal responsibility. I make choices for myself that are good choices for myself. I don't look back and regret or worry or feel shame, and that is huge, because that has given me peace of mind. And from everything that I've experienced, like, that's all that I want. And people talk about a life beyond your wildest dreams, but you know what? I don't want these highs and lows anymore. I just want to coast in the middle. It's not healthy for me to be chasing these highs and lows, because without the alcohol and the drugs, I can still fall into those patterns, and they're not good for me. I'm content with a life of, you know, normality, getting up, doing the shopping, cleaning my apartment, looking after myself, showering, brushing my teeth, all these things that I was not very good at. I didn't really used to do. And the mornings, oh my God, I love the mornings. Yeah. I love getting up before everyone else. And do you know, like that hour before the world is awake? And because for me, mornings were filled with either dread, because the birds were starting to tweet and it's like, oh, fuck, it's the next day. Or I was coming round from I've been out of it for like a binge on 3 or 4 days, and now I just really cherish the mornings. It's my favourite time of day.
Yes, love that. Snap.
Banging.
And now, Karl, we would love you to write a letter to drunk Karl. What would you say to him, starting, Dear Karl?
Stop buying fucking Chateau Neuf de Pape from the Co-op at 7 a.m. You can't afford it, and it's ridiculous. Dear Karl, you are enough, and you are trying to numb pain that you're not really aware of, but if you keep doing that, it's going to get worse and worse and worse, and you don't have to hit every rock bottom. You don't have to hit every rock bottom. You can stop sooner, and it feels like peace is so far out of reach. But honestly, mate, it's not. It's not. It's much closer than you think. Love from Karl.
That's
Yes,
great.
mate, that was amazing. Thank you
Yes.
so much for flying here from London, and I think giving us one of the most beautifully eloquent and honest interviews we've had. That's been a really moving and
Yeah,
relatable
thank you.
Thank
chat.
you.
So thank you so much, and
Thank you for
hopefully
having
you
me.
make your train back.
I think your flowers.
No,
Sorry
thank you,
for
mate.
waffling on.
No,
No, we love it, mate. Thank you
That's
so
great.
much.